The philosopher Mencius once said, when Confucius stood on Mount Taishan, the world seemed to shrink. Confucius made Taishan famous, and the mountain in return influenced the great sage's thinking. But how did standing on its summit shape his interpretation of man's relationship with nature? Find out in Confucius and Mount Taishan, the first part of a new series, Great Masters of the Past.
Mount Taishan occupies an area of over 400 square kilometers in the heart of Shandong province. Its highest peak rises to 1,545 meters above sea level. Mount Taishan's stunning natural beauty and the rich cultural heritage associated with it have made the mountain a symbol of the Chinese national spirit. As the most easterly mountain in China, Mount Taishan is the first to greet the sunrise each morning. "3,000 years ago, Mount Taishan became part of the state of Lu. Confucius was born in the year 551 BC in Nishan, southeast of the city of Qufu. His parents gave him the name Jiao. Confucius would become the greatest thinker and educator of the late spring and autumn period. For the past 2,000 years, Confucianism has, along with Taoism and Buddhism, profoundly influenced the development of Chinese culture. Confucius would forever be associated with Mount Taishan. The Annals of Mount Taishan, compiled during the Ming Dynasty, states Confucius was the first person to appreciate the beauty of Mount Taishan. Confucius is largely responsible for investing Mount Taishan with its cultural identity.
就孔子所生活的时代而讲，他生活在春秋末期。这个时候，东周王朝可以说是名存实亡，而虽然东周与各诸侯国之间还有一些等级关系，但是氏族关系遭到了极大的破坏，神权也丢失了。 社会道德以及维护社会秩序的一些礼仪也纷纷丢失了。可以说，到了这个时候，用一个词可以说，那就是到了礼崩乐坏的这样一个境地。
However, the state of Lu was still heavily influenced by the rites and music practiced at the Zhou imperial court, and it was in this atmosphere that Confucius was brought up. At the age of just 15, he resolved to devote his life to studying and promoting the rites, music, and institutional systems of the Zhou dynasty. In the year 522 BC, Confucius founded the first private school in China. He was the sole teacher. Most of Confucius' students came from poor families. However, Confucius quickly established a reputation as an able teacher, and Meng Shize, a minister of the state of Lu, sent his 2 sons to study under him.
那孔子所以说一生啊，其实他最光辉的职业就是老师。他30岁的时候就开始在信坛上设坛教书，一直到他去世73岁去世，有40多年的时间，他最主要的职业都是在做老师。孔子作为一个教育家来讲，他不仅有着一套丰富的教学实践经验，同时他有着非常完整的教育理论。
At the time, Mount Taishan was situated on the border between 2 states, the state of Qi and the state of Lu. The state of Lu was the fiefdom of an imperial prince of Zhou, and he was entitled to use court protocols and music. Mount Taishan was revered as one of China's 4 sacred mountains. As the most easterly of the 4 sacred mountains, and since the god of the east was the ruler of all living things, Mount Taishan was regularly the object of sacrifices offered by the country's feudal emperors. Confucius studied these sacrificial ceremonies, particularly those conducted by the Prince of Zhou. He then set about trying to restore the Zhou dynasty rituals and music. The most famous sacrificial ceremony conducted by a Zhou emperor was one held at Jiagu in Laiwu, on the east side of Mount Taishan. In 500 BC, Confucius was appointed deputy prime minister of Lu. His political ideas would help the state grow strong and stable. In the neighbouring state of Qi, however, Prince Jing was concerned at Lu's rising prosperity. He invited Prince Ding, ruler of Lu, to a meeting at Jiagu, hoping to force him to acknowledge Qi's supremacy. Prince Ding was accompanied to the meeting by Confucius. It was Confucius who took the precaution of ordering a detachment of soldiers to guard them. At the meeting, Confucius, through his strict observance of protocol and his even-handedness, convinced Prince Jing that Lu would not succumb to duress. The prince quickly called an end to the meeting and left. Following the Jiagu meeting, officials in Qi became concerned that with Confucius in a position of influence, Lu might become a threat. 4 years later, Qi began sending costly gifts to the Prince of Lu in an attempt to corrupt him. It worked. Before long, the prince was overindulging in wine and women. Disgusted, Confucius resolved to leave Lu, taking his students with him. And for the next 14 years they wandered the country, travelling from state to state. Despite the many hardships, Confucius remained optimistic. At the age of 63, he said of himself, "I work so hard, I forget to eat. I'm so happy, I forget all worries. I'm impervious to my advancing years." By this time, Confucius had travelled through 9 states, yet not one of their princes had offered him an official post. However, Confucius was not unduly affected. He remained optimistic and committed to his principles. At the age of 68, Confucius was persuaded by his student Ranqiu to return to his native Lu. The Prince of Lu, although he treated Confucius with respect, did not offer him an official post. Confucius died in the year 479 BC at the age of 73.
孔子所处的是春秋末期，国君啊、诸侯啊，他们的内心的欲望只有一种占有，一种并吞，就是进行兼并战争。对孔子这种所谓的仁治、礼治，恐怕是很难达到他们的兼并政策的。所以说，孔子在那个社会推出他这种仁爱之政，让当时的统治者以人治国，以人治天下，是不合时代的节拍的。所以说，孔子这也就注定了他作为思想家的一面，他是要失意的，他是要孤独的，他是要充满悲剧色彩。
In front of Hongmen Palace beside Mount Taishan, there stands an archway. An inscription on it reads, "Where Confucius stood." The archway dates from the year 1560 and was erected on the orders of Zhu An, Imperial Commissioner to Shandong Province. The words in the couplet read, "The lone visit of Confucius has been remembered all this time. His virtues are eulogized forever." On either side of the archway, there's a stone tablet. One bears the words, "Number one mountain under heaven," and the other, an inscription reading, "Standing on a height, one will feel humbled." Numerous places on Mount Taishan have associations with Confucius. West of Bixia Yuanyun Shrine is the only Confucius temple built on a mountaintop. Originally constructed in the 1520s, it was renovated 50 years later. The inscription on the temple's front gate was written by the 19th century scholar Xu Zonggan. It reads, "Seen from below it seems even higher. When struck, it becomes harder. It communicates with the gods. Towering head and shoulders above all else, it seems to reach the sky." Inside the temple are statues of Confucius and his students Yanzi, Zhengzi, Zisi, and Mencius. From the Han Dynasty 2,000 years ago and onwards, China's feudal emperors had Confucius temples built across the country. A stone tablet used to stand on Jianlu Terrace, high up on Mount Taishan's southern side. An inscription on it read, "From where Confucius stood, the world looked smaller." The philosopher Mencius commented, "When Confucius stood on Mount Dongshan, Lu looked smaller. When he stood on Mount Taishan, the world looked smaller." Its close associations with Confucius were a key factor when Mount Taishan was named a World Cultural Heritage Site. Confucius himself said, "The benevolent love mountains, and the wise love water." In his time, Confucius had a celebrity effect. This effect brought scholars and famous people to Mount Taishan to see for themselves the smaller world from its top. Gradually, visiting the mountain became a tradition, and the mountain itself became a cultural symbol. Confucianism has had a profound influence on political and social life in China for over 2,000 years. Confucius was an advocate of personal and state ethics. At the core of his thinking were benevolence, uprightness, propriety, wisdom, and good faith. His views on personal appearance, speech, vision, and thought form the basic principles of traditional Chinese ethics. The Analects of Confucius is a collection of quotations by the great sage, compiled by his students. The book reveals his views on ethics. Confucius also contributed to the fields of economics, law, politics, sociology, aesthetics, logic, and military affairs. Traveling frequently between the states of Qi and Lu, Confucius concluded that the wise love water and the benevolent love mountains. By this, he was referring to a relationship between the natural environment and the human personality. Confucius also said, the wise prefer action, the benevolent prefer tranquility. The wise are happy, the benevolent live a longer life. Here, he was referring to the benefits of the natural scenery for the health and mind. The ceremony to pay homage to Mount Taishan consists of rites and sacred music. Confucius demonstrated that the broader vision gained when standing on top of Mount Taishan allows a person to better evaluate his or her virtues and knowledge. In his latter years, Confucius compiled a collection of poems for a volume called The Book of Songs. In one of the poems he wrote, "Lofty Mount Taishan keeps watch over the state of Lu." These words allude to the very important place the mountain occupied in his heart. Confucius bequeathed to Mount Taishan a rich legacy of culture and philosophy. Later it would be said, Confucius is in Mount Taishan, and Mount Taishan is in Confucius. Still today, many centuries later, an image endures in the popular imagination of Zilu, Xihua, and other students of Confucius discussing political and academic subjects with their teacher on the mountain. Somewhat sadder is the image of Confucius on his own, measuring the length of the mountain trail. The pine trees have flourished on Mount Taishan for centuries. It is said that they remain strong and vigorous by assimilating nutrients from the emerald clouds. Mount Taishan and Confucius have fused into an eternal symbol of Chinese traditional culture. Here, enjoying the magnificent view of the rising sun means feeling the eternal existence of Confucius, the man and the philosopher.
Mount Wuyi is famous for its beautiful natural scenery. It is also well known because of its association with the 12th century philosopher Zhu Xi, the father of New Confucianism. On one of his rare trips away from Mount Wuyi, Zhu Xi took part in the famous Goose Lake debate. What two schools of thought clashed in this historic exchange of views? Find out in Zhu Xi and Mount Wuyi, the second part of Great Masters of the Past.